It is our delight to be here for this third concert in the history of Roanoke Baroque. Thanks for joining us during this debut season of our work together and bringing this wonderful music to Roanoke and beyond. Beyond, speaking of which, we have YouTube viewers everywhere. Our audiences have been exceeded by 3 times on the live streaming, which is so exciting. I know there's folks in Puerto Rico this evening that told me they're watching. There are folks in California. There's folks in Ohio that have all said, I'm watching tonight. So welcome. Glad you're here. So it's really nice to have that breadth of what the technology can bring to us. Yes, tonight is all about Antonio Lucio Vivaldi, one of the premier composers of the Baroque period, lived about exactly the same time as Johann Sebastian Bach, and a particularly interesting career and individual. He was called the red-haired priest. I think you can tell why he was called red-haired in that lovely drawing from the era. But he began studying for the priesthood at age 15 and was ordained at the age of 25. He was, however, excused from celebrating Mass because he had some sort of asthmatic or bronchial condition and couldn't stop coughing when he was at the table. So they excused him from leading Mass. Apparently, even before COVID, they were concerned about those kinds of things. But he continued to serve in his own way through music, which was a wonderful gifting that he had been given. And he served in this wonderful place, and we'll take the next slide and see his place of employment, the Ospedale della Pietà, the Hospital of Mercy. And if we were to draw a comparison to the Ospedale della Pietà in Roanoke today, it would be a combination of the Blue Ridge Women's Center and a preparatory school. Something like Faith Christian would probably be a good connection of that, because it was for young women and their children, mostly orphans or from the lower rungs of society who couldn't afford an education and didn't quite know what to do. They would go to the Ospedale and they'd be cared for, and they would be taught to play the violin or something really strange like the bassoon. And that was what happened at the Ospedale. There were about 100 young women there. About 60 of them were in the orchestra and about 40 were in the choir. And they became one of the most well-known and famous orchestras in Europe at the time. A really remarkable program, and that's where Vivaldi spent most of his career, writing most of his music for these young women. So we really see that come to life in young musicians and in the colorful aspect of this music making that was very vibrant and very, very youthful. If you see that Ospedale today, it's still there in the Venice Canal. We can see that in the next slide. This is the Ospedale, and right next to it has been built a magnificent church that is commonly called the Vivaldi Church. But he didn't know that. It's really not called that. But people call it that because they do Vivaldi concerts all the time right next to the Ospedale della Pietà. And this evening, we open with one of those concerti that was written for young women who played the bassoon. And I think we have another picture of Vivaldi coming up that is his more sort of flamboyant artist picture. Notice he's holding the violin, which he was a brilliant artist on, but not a bow, but rather a quill pen, because he's writing that music underneath the violin. So it suggests he's both a brilliant violinist and a brilliant composer all at once. Also, he's a very striking individual in this picture with that glowing red hair, that long, handsome face, rather tall, stately fellow. And perhaps we have a distant relative of his this evening playing the bassoon concerto, which we might see in the next slide. That's our bassoon soloist. Kevin Pfister happens to be my son-in-law, so that's a good thing. And he's joining us to play one of about 40 bassoon concertos that Vivaldi wrote during his lifetime. An extraordinary number of bassoon concertos. And it's a delight to have this. Now, a concerto in Vivaldi's time was really almost his invention. He was one of the very first composers to put a soloist out in front of the orchestra for an entire piece. And these bassoon concertos are just perfect examples of that kind of work. About 10 minutes long, 3 movements, and the next slide will show just what those movements are. And a little bassoon above. We have an allegro poco, a little bit fast, an andante, kind of a walking tempo, and then a final allegro fast and very, very energetic. So we welcome our soloist, Kevin Pfister. Welcome, Kevin. Just a quick audience survey. How many was that their first bassoon concerto? Ah, yes, I thought so. Remember it now so you can say it wasn't next time. A wonderful repertoire. We're going to move to this incredibly wonderful concerto for violin called The Four Seasons, and probably one of Vivaldi's most well-known and well-loved works. And as you can see in the graphic, there are four seasons depicted here. We're going to start ours in the autumn and move to winter and go to spring and end in the summer. Vivaldi wrote these four seasons based upon four sonnets that he may well also have written. And they describe the character and nature of the seasons and things that happen within them. So tonight you have in your programs the sonnets, so you can read them and get the character of Vivaldi's imaging. And also we'll project those on the screen. If you don't want to look down and just look up, you can do that too. And also, after some of the sonnets have been up for a while, we'll change to a pictorial image of that season that captures the spirit of what Vivaldi was feeling and trying to share in the midst of that. But I think it'd also be fun to just hear a couple of the things that you might imagine along the way. One of our favorites in rehearsing has been the viola. Dog barking. We're not sure if it's dog barking or goat bleating in the season where the goat herds are out there. But Brian, would you mind giving just a little bit of bleating there? And it's marvelous. And another great moment are the birds chirping. And Christy, could you give it just a little bit of the birds chirping there when we get to the springtime? And the little trilly things there in the solo section. Yeah. All kinds of all trilling happens there. And if I'll pick on the violas again. At the beginning of the winter movement, there's this little snappy shivering thing that happens that Vivaldi talks about in the sonnet. So that's it. And the whole orchestra builds on these shivers. So use your imagination throughout the four seasons to hear the effects that Vivaldi is bringing, because he was one of the very first composers to write music that was meant to tell stories. This is very much a 19th century thing, 200 years later perhaps. But for Vivaldi, it was very real that he wanted to share the image and the picture and the feeling that his music was driven to share. And we introduced this evening our guest soloist. His information is in your program, but I'm delighted to have with us Isaac Kay, all the way from Los Angeles. Welcome, Isaac. And so we begin with the movement of autumn, and we can move to the next slide there and let the sonnets begin to be told and begin to tell the story of the four seasons.
much for being here, and it's so nice to be welcomed. Everybody in Roanoke is really nice. So I'm coming from LA where everybody's like, you know, kind of nice. But it means so much to be here, and thanks. This is now our second run-through of the Vivaldi today, so it's good. It's good for you, you know? It's good to do this. It's like taking vitamins. I might, who knows? Yeah. So I have a piece for you I'll play. This is the last movement of Bach's G minor sonata for solo violin. This is the Presto. We'll see if I can get through it. But I just want to say it really means so much. Music is all about connection and collaboration, not competition. So learn that young violinists particularly. We get sometimes tricky. We want to be better than other people, and we shouldn't. So it means a lot to be here. Michael and I have been friends for a long time. He's been a mentor of mine throughout the years. And so this violin has got a cool story, and I'll tell you a little bit about it because I like cool stories. This violin is, should I have a microphone? Yeah, sure. Oh dear, okay.
You can tell a story.
I'm gonna tell, oh, there we go. If I'm gonna tell a story, it might as well be heard. Although I have a loud voice, so I don't think I have a problem. It's for the YouTube, okay. Hi, Mom and Dad, if you're watching. So I was in need of a violin, and sorry. I'm a really emotional person, so it's hard for me to get through this story without crying. So it's good. Thank you for letting me cry. So it's a really tough one. So I needed a violin, and so I'm not going to use the microphone. I needed a violin, and it's really hard to come by a good violin. So I was going abroad, and I needed an instrument. And so I had told Michael, who was known as Dr. Schosberger back then, by the way. So it's very strange. The first thing I did when I landed in Roanoke, Michael said, "You're not allowed to call me Dr. Schosberger. No one here does, so you have to call me Michael." I said, "Okay." So I needed a violin, and I told Michael, I said, if something comes up, let me know. I'm in need of something. This is my soul. This is my voice, you know. And so I needed something that was better, and so than what I had. And so I was studying abroad in Germany, which is a dream. And Michael sends me an email about mid-semester. This is my junior year of college. And he says, "As a matter of fact, you have no idea who came to the music department today. A couple who probably are watching, Stephanie and Christine, and they said, we have a violin that's been in our family for around a century, and we don't know what to do with it." And Michael, as the opportunist that he is, and I love him for this, no answer is ever no, it's always yes. He said, "Boy, I've got somebody who needs a violin." And so this violin, Stephanie and Christine, they're dear family to me now. They live in Santa Barbara, and this violin, their father, Stephanie's father, left Germany. He was German. He was living in Germany at the time, and he left Germany before the war and escaped with this violin. And he was an amazing man. I never got to meet him, but it was his violin. And within 3 years of coming to Germany, coming to America, he learned how to speak English and had a law degree from Harvard. Very smart guy, if I'm getting the details correct. And the violin sat for a very, very long time. And so they brought it to Michael, and Michael said, "I've got a kid who's been bugging me about getting an instrument." And so this violin is from 1765. It's in beautiful condition, as you can see. I'll show for everybody. The cool thing about it is that the maker is Helmer, who you may not have heard of Helmer. You've probably heard of Stradivarius, you know. They're good, but Helmer's what I want, you know. And so the only thing we know about Helmer is that Beethoven owned a Helmer. So it's a very amazing violin. And to make the story even more cool is that I was with Michael this summer in Europe playing some concerts as a farewell tour for him with the orchestra that he was with. And we were in Prague. Remind me of whose place we were at.
Leibowitz.
The Leibowitz family's home in Prague, which is now a museum which hosts all of Beethoven's instruments. and all of his music and original scores of the Fifth and the Sixth and the Fourth and you name it symphonies, right? So I was a little bit tired that day, so I said, I'm going to go down to the beer garden and I'll meet you guys all out there. And so I was playing a lot, and so I said, and I walked right through the room with all of his instruments. And of course, as fate has it, as soon as we left, my dear friend Leah, who's coming for this next concert, you need to come hear her play, she's wonderful. She said, Isaac, did you see the other Helmer, Beethoven's Helmer, is down in the living room in this building. So it's the brother violin to my violin that I get to play. And so I'm just so lucky, and the Schlossbergers have they've been a big part of my story in helping me find my voice. And thank you for letting me cry. It's very helpful to cry. And so, thank you. Music means a lot. Music means a lot to a lot of people, and so it just touches your soul when you're able to find your voice. And so with that, I'll shut up, and I will play for you the Presto from Bach's G minor. Violin flat out.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Stefan and Christine Riesenfeld, for letting that violin come back to life in Isaac's hands. It's a real gift. We have something really special to close with. This is kind of a grand, spectacular fireworks finale. In your very town, right here in Roanoke, in our town, we have wonderful young violinists who are growing up someday to play in Roanoke Baroque, and we're encouraging them. We have two of their teachers in the orchestra. We have Brian in our viola section and Sarah in our violin section, and Brian's brother Kevin have marvelous violin and viola studios. And we have several of their students here this evening that are going to jump up and play the first movement of Vivaldi's Violin Concerto in A minor. They've been studying this, some of them for months, some of them surprisingly just for a few weeks, and have really done a wonderful job in preparing this. And the orchestra is just thrilled to be their backup band to share with you young talent, young soloists right here in Roanoke. Come on up, violinists. Come on. Be a part of the orchestra. I think we got you set. As Pastor Steve mentioned, Isaac will be with us a bit in the 8:15 worship service tomorrow here at St. John. And we repeat this concert at 3 o'clock tomorrow at First Evangelical Presbyterian Church downtown on Jefferson by all the Carilion complex. If you do Facebook or Instagram or any of those things, send out a message to all your friends in Roanoke and tell them to come. I would love to share that excitement and pass on the news that this is a thriving and an exciting venture here in Roanoke. So appreciative of your being with us. And at the very end, there'll be a slide about our next and final program of the season in May. And there's wonderful stories to tell in the mix of that movement. And someone's pointing this direction. Oh, thank you, reception crew, yes. There is a wonderful reception just over here in Cafe St. John, just out to the side. Don't miss it. The musicians will stay and linger because they always stay and linger when there's food. And you can meet them and talk to them about their instruments and their lives and how they make this wonderful music happen. Thank you, reception crew, for reminding me of that and for making the reception happen. That's really, really beautiful. Thank you, and come again. Thank you very much.